Hello and welcome to another episode of the Beyond the Device podcast, where we explore the life-defining moments that shape careers within the medical device industry. We are particularly interested in understanding how someone's personal experiences, challenges, or pivotal events influence professional journeys. And as we progress through the conversation, we will eventually land on the question, what is the one defining moment or experience that changed everything and set you on the path that you're onto today? Today's guest is Chris Lee from Summit Medical, where he's been the CEO that has led them through pretty much every headwind you can think of. He's dealt with Brexit, COVID, global supply chain chaos, MDR inflation, and then some tough commercial decisions along the way. But what makes Chris's journey interesting is that it isn't a textbook career path. It's just that there was a very specific moment early on in his career that completely changed how he saw himself, his capabilities, and the direction that it took him on from then on. At the time, it didn't feel like an opportunity. It never does. But looking back, it clearly was. And in the conversation, we're going to unpack that moment, how it shaped him as a leader, and why Chris is now transitioning from exec leadership into a board and portfolio role, and what that shift really feels like when you're living it and not theorizing about it. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Nathan's teed that up nicely, but before we get into that, Chris, tell us a bit about your early years and what shaped you growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think broadly it was shaped by both my parents. My mum, who's almost 90 now, had a zest for travel, and which was pretty unusual back in those days. But I think I definitely picked up that from her, and always, even from early days, remembering wanting to travel and experience things. And my dad spent his whole life in the MedTech field, broadly in surgical instruments. So although it wasn't really an ambition, it was kind of always there in the background. And so I kind of always saw it that way. But I didn't have any ambition or desire at that time or kind of direction that I thought I was heading into. And for me, it was really a question of finding things I loved doing. I described the first 5 or 6 years of my working life as broadly gap years, to be honest. Just doing things I enjoyed, which broadly involved travel. I was a cycle courier. I worked for DHL, delivering packages around the world. I moved people's furniture abroad. I was in the Royal Navy. I did a whole bunch of different stuff that were all kind of life enriching things. And I did all of those because I didn't really follow the conventional educational path, where I left school at 15 and a half. I'm sure I sat around for a couple of exams, but nothing of significance. And so it was kind of, there was really no direction at all other than just have fun and enjoy myself. And I didn't really think about a career or a path, or at that stage of my life. It was a long time before I started thinking about, was there something that I should be doing that's different? And I realized as I got more bored with things, I had to think more about what the future would hold for me. So I think that was kind of the early stages, and just that classic, a bit of a cliche, but the University of Life thing is absolutely true for me, because that's where I learned an awful lot about living and people and life, I think, before I then entered the real world of work.
Yeah, I was literally about to say the University of Life piece myself. Like a lot of those early jobs that you described, I'm sure haven't made it onto your LinkedIn profile, but in the early years, that's what shaped you. And within like either the education system, you've already mentioned your parents, but some of those early jobs, were there any key role models that either from just like values growing up or that did set you on this path?
Yeah, there was one guy I worked for, unbelievably, in a removal company, a furniture removal company, and he was the leader of that business. And he was a scientist by background. He was a pilot, and he'd worked on rocket science. I mean, this guy was off the scale, bright and unbelievable, but just decided after he'd done that for 25 years, he was 30, 40 years older than me at the time, that he wanted to do something where he could just connect with people. And just listening to him, the stories about his life, what he'd done, where he'd been, things he'd experienced, but actually working in such an academic environment, he missed that standard run-of-the-mill people connection that you don't always experience when you're working in such a high press, high stress situation where the people are, let's just say, like-minded. And I think he said he missed out a lot on things that made him want to go and do something different later on. And it was probably an early thing that got me thinking about where I would go after I'd done it the other way around to what he was doing.
Yeah. I actually, when I finished university, I went home and my sister worked in the service department at Volkswagen. So she got me a job basically just collecting and delivering cars, which ticked me over for a bit. But the other guy that did that job was semi-retired. He used to run a big chain of restaurants, and we used to just sit in the car together all day, going and picking up cars. And actually, reflecting on that, the amount I would have just absorbed from him and him just telling me about his previous career, I just thought I was driving cars, listening to TalkSport, but actually I'd have got so much from that. And I wouldn't have thought about it. I've not thought about him for years until now.
No, there's always someone along the way like that, I think, who now you know more. You think I could have absorbed so much more, learnt more from that situation.
Yeah, and he was a Liverpool fan as well. So Nathan wasn't my first colleague that chews my ear off about Liverpool.
Unfortunately for you, I'm afraid, but there we go.
So then, as you did start to maybe take your career more seriously, what was the first step into this world?
Yeah, so my dad, who had his own business at the time, in the sort of ENT and ophthalmic world, he had a domestic business in the UK selling consumables in that space, and he partnered with another company who did exporting to West Africa, and he offered me the opportunity to come and work with them in the office, essentially answer the telephone, just learning about letters of credit and all that kind of stuff. Everything was completely unknown to me at the time. And I went and did that for about 12 months. Didn't really enjoy it, but I sort of persevered with it. Then I went on the road and became a sales rep working in central London. That was a really interesting experience. I think I was absolutely terrible at it at first, and just, never saw my career as a salesperson. And I think about 9 months into that, I realized that sales wasn't about being the best salesperson. It was about being the best person who connects with other people. Mm-hmm. And I think that was where I learned, actually, I think I quite like this. This is not a bad place to be.
You just described our job.
Yeah, exactly. I did a little bit of work commissioning a hospital down in West Africa, which was interesting to say the least, in Nigeria. And one of the companies we were representing at the time was Ethicon, and because the big part of the tender had a lot of Ethicon products in it, and my dad had said to me that, in his opinion, they are the gold standard company, and if you're going to get a job with anyone and you want to get a real education, that's where you need to go and work. So I spent the next couple of years trying to get a job with Ethicon, eventually got into that business, got a job, and my dad uttered the immortal words, "Whatever you do, don't mess it up," all words to that effect. I genuinely, when I got that job, I genuinely thought, this is it. I've absolutely hit the jackpot here. I've made it. I've got a sales job with a top company, with a company car. I'm golden. I don't need to think too much more about life. This is me set. And I entered into that role thinking, if I could just hold this down, this would be great. This would be like a huge achievement and a step up from driving lorries and moving furniture. So I was at that point in my life, I felt pretty content that I'd made a big step forward.
Okay. Yeah, I think just you go through those phases in life, and Nathan and I have said it the same with our business, and I will say what we say: don't fuck it up, because you've built a business that is like serving you personally and stuff like that. But naturally, things happen in life, and you think, well, if we don't keep up with change, everything else is going to change, and you get left behind. You have to constantly think about the next thing, and I'm sure that moment then came. And it maybe wasn't enough, or you had your eye on the next challenge. But I'll hand over to Nathan, because I think we're ready to delve into these pivotal moments.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And as we always say on here, you don't usually realize it's a pivotal moment until you go through it, look back, and then you realize how important it is. So do you have a standout moment? If so, what is it? Yeah, you wouldn't mind sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. So after joining J&J, in the Ethicon division particularly, the average tenure of a sales rep at the time was 21 years out of 36 people, just to give you some sense of how long people stayed around in that business. And so I was pretty much told, get your head down, work hard, and maybe within 5 years you become a sales trainer, and then maybe within 10 years a regional manager. And that was pretty much the career path at the time. And my only ambition at the time was to work as hard as I could and be as successful as I could, and see how I got on. But it was more about job maintenance than it was about sparkling, I think, at the time. And things just went really well. I won Best Newcomer that year. The second year, a job came up in the head office working in the export division. I applied for it, told to apply for it because it would be good for me to be seen to apply for it, but not expecting to get it. I got the job. I ended up moving to Edinburgh and was then there for 8.5 years. And I started to think about, crikey, this is really quite interesting. There's much more to this. And I didn't even know, honestly, that Ethicon was part of Johnson & Johnson when I joined the company. It was it was that whole wide world of what J&J had to offer was completely new to me. And then when the keyhole surgery division started and that whole thing blew up, this was like an opportunity that came out of nowhere that just fell at the right time for me. And we had a new leader come into the business from a different part of J&J, who was completely different to any I'd ever worked with before. He was completely dynamic. He was also pretty ruthless and hard, but he got stuff done and he made a real difference. And he was a bit of a love-or-hate character, but I learned a massive amount from him. And he gave me a lot of opportunity, he put a lot of faith in me to deliver. And one day, I'd just been promoted to sales director, and one day he called me into his office, and I walked in, I sat down, and he chucked a bunch of A4 sheets at me on the table and told me to read them. I looked at them, and there was about 10 different announcements, Johnson & Johnson announcements of job promotions that I was reading in front of me, all different ones for different people. And he just said, look, I read through the lot. And he said, right, what's the common denominator in all of those announcements? So I was struggling to find the connection he was looking for. And he said, let me help you with it. He said, see paragraph 3, it talks about their education. Okay, that's what happens in a corporation like this. You are, to my mind, one of the most capable people that I've got working in my team. And I think you've got huge potential, but there's a paragraph missing if I write anything about you. And that's just not going to work around here, right? So you need to do something to fill that paragraph. And that was when he told me to go and find the best MBA I could find that would be good for my personal and professional development. And, I embarked upon a 2-year executive MBA at Cranfield, which meant was arduous to say the least, because I was living in Scotland, traveling to Bedford for residential weekends for 2 years as a sales director, spend the rest of the week driving around the country. Yeah, it was intense to say the least, but it was an absolute game changer for me in terms of knowledge, experience, capability, opportunity, learning. It was phenomenal, and unquestionably a turning point personally in terms of my belief and understanding of what could be achieved, and just the whole encouragement that came with that, and the support, and what that led to has made that blindingly obvious to me what a pivotal moment that was.
And how were you actually feeling in that moment, looking at the paper, seeing what's on there and realizing there's a gap? Like, what was it? Immediately positive, or how were you feeling?
I'm generally a really positive person. So despite the fact there was a brief moment where I thought, do I really want to go into education for 2 years at nights and weekends, 400 miles away from where I'm living? There was a brief pause for that. But honestly, I just grabbed it with both hands because it was just too good an opportunity to be true. And actually, when I actually got on the program, it was way better than I even expected or anticipated. There were 72 of us in the cohort, split into teams of 6 with multidisciplinary teams, and just the learning from it and the experience was unbelievable, and made some lifelong friends who I still connect with, who I still ask questions of, still learn from, who are in different functions, different businesses, different backgrounds. I think we had 17 people with Oxbridge backgrounds. And, I connected with a few of them really, really well from a context of they had everything I had. They had everything they wanted to be that I had, that was the social interaction and the people skills. And they had all the academic experience and background that I longed for. And it was just a fabulous opportunity to learn from both and move forward in a sort of collaborative way. And I learned a huge amount about people in that whole experience.
And obviously you've learned from people and just the experience in itself. But like, what are the standout lessons from that time that you now carry today in the work that you do?
I think the single biggest thing I took forward from that, and it is something that you grow over time. It's not immediate. It's through every job you do. But I think prior to going into that experience, I was of a mindset that if you want it done well, do it yourself. I didn't understand the value of collaboration and teamwork in the way I do now. And I think when I came out of that experience, that was the starting point for me around building teams, having the right people around you, having different skill sets, different cultures, different backgrounds, different attitudes that build highly functioning teams. And I think that's something I've tried to grow and explore more in every single business I've been in. And you don't always get it right and you still make mistakes. That's inevitable. But I think that's probably the single biggest thing, is understanding your own strengths and weaknesses, how you fill those gaps and how you leverage a team to get the absolute best out of it. And I think, I wish I'd known that years before it dawned on me, but that is the biggest game changer for me, without a doubt.
So had that not have happened and you didn't go and get the MBA, maybe someone else would have suggested it at a later time, but let's assume you didn't do that. Where do you think your career would have gone? Do you reckon you'd have hit a ceiling somewhere?
I think I was probably at the ceiling. I had bags of energy and desire and commitment. I don't think that was ever going to be at fault, but just sheer capability wise, with such limited knowledge and background, you can only learn as much as you can on the job on the way. And think things like finance and accounting and economics, and project management, all those things you do in your MBA, and all of the module stuff around strategic HR stuff that you just don't know, that they're not a playbook, but they give you a lot of insight and understanding to how you manage those things going forward. And then you build expertise around you that has that, and then all of a sudden you put all that together, and then it's just about how do you inspire a team of people to make a difference. And so I think sales or selling in a low level environment would have probably been about where I was heading, I would say.
Okay. And having left school at 15 and a half, and then just through sheer will and good people skills, and you've got to that point, you've then gone back into education with the MBA at a later stage in your career. So since then, has it changed your view on continuous learning? Have you done anything since the MBA to keep that muscle moving?
I would say I do something every single day to keep that muscle moving. I mean, I've not done, if you ask me, have I signed up for a PhD? Absolutely not. But I have, I read extensively, whereas I never used to before. I've been trying to learn as much as I can about AI in the last 18 months to really make sure I stay ahead of stuff. Yeah. I read a lot about leadership. I read a lot about people development, and I try and stay at the cutting edge of those things to make sure I'm applying new knowledge, new skills to developing teams, because the world changes really quickly, as you guys know, right? And you fall off the ladder really quickly, right? I think in this business, and you look how fast MedTech changes, the pace of innovation, the stuff that changes, that goes on. I think it's so easy to get left behind, and I think it's my biggest fear is just that, is being left behind. And the only way to avoid that is to work with young, dynamic people who continuously upgrade your knowledge and awareness, and learning, and apply those things on a daily basis, and know that you're not the brightest person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that, I suppose the rate of change we're going to see in the next 6, 12, 18 months with AI, like, it should probably scare everyone. And if you're not on top of it, it's gonna.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's the case. And anyone who's sitting around thinking, I'm not sure if this is going to affect me or not, then you're misguided. I think every single one of us is going to be impacted in some way. And the sooner you get on board with it and understand it, the better, because it will change everything.
Mm. So the continuous learning that you do, the reading, that's still like quite self-development stuff. But in terms of your core network and perhaps in times where you need support, what does that support system look like? Who do you lean on?
Yeah, I mean, I think inevitably, family is always at the core of everything, right? Every decision that I make, everything I do, every job I've taken, everywhere I go, that has to gel with the family. And so I've always lent on those dynamics and that input and that support, because I think that's huge. But 19 years in J&J, and then 20 years since as a CEO stroke GM in a whole range of businesses, from startups to SMEs in public, private, PE, venture backed, you come across an enormous amount of people, and there I sit in a group of private equity backed CEOs, and there's an annual conference there, and there were 230 of us at that meeting this year, and just the knowledge in that room. I'd sat there this year thinking, there is nothing that's not known about in this room that can't get done, right? And everyone gives their time for free, right? Because everyone in that group is in the same boat, right? And it's more that, it's more tapping into that knowledge and understanding and experience that people have had and lived that makes the difference. Because most reading is more theoretical and less action based, and I just find that's where the real gems are in the knowledge of the people.
Yeah, it's just being in the room at the right table. And we've created it with the Kapu community, and we see in the WhatsApp group every day someone will have a question, and we've created an environment where someone will have the answer. You have to go and ask for it, but if you put yourself out there, we say all the time, opportunities are connected to people, and the answer to the problem that you're facing, someone has that.
Yeah, inevitably. Yeah, and sometimes multiple people have it, and if you can get different views as well, you can then tailor your approach to your specific circumstances based on those multiple inputs. Yeah.
So let's talk about this last 20 years of your career to date as a GM, as a CEO, as a leader, and the ups and downs that Nathan mentioned in the introduction. Because what I want to talk about is how you have personally handled those periods where you're the CEO, you've got to be that stable voice, making the decisions at critical times. But how have you personally dealt with that, just in terms of your mental health and emotional well-being?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many ups and downs through that, and as has been said many times, it can be a lonely place at times, and I think those networks that I just referred to, for most of my career, those didn't really exist unless you built them on a one-to-one basis, mostly through people you'd worked with in historically, and so you do have to draw on all your resources internally to have an understanding of what those impacts have. And for me, there was always a small handful of people who were my mentors, who were usually people who had been either chairman or board directors or previous CEOs, who I had a very small group who I just used as my sounding board for any particular situations that arose, but were in most cases not in my business at the time, because I was relying on someone who didn't have a vested interest or a skin in the game to give me an unbiased view on different situations. And that for me just helped me keep me grounded, make me stay calm in the eyes of the rest of the team, because the last thing you need to do is panic or show that you're not on top of things or in control, and just having someone to bounce those things off and rationalize things, because nothing is ever as bad as it seems after the event. It's all, I think when you reflect back, you think, I got quite uptight about that, but actually there's a solution to pretty much everything. When I look back in my career, nothing ever got the better of us.
Yeah.
There's always a way out of it. And I think if you go into it with that mindset of just saying that we've got an issue, this is what it is, we just need to find the solution, right? And the more smart, intelligent heads you get around the table discussing that and working out that solution, the quicker you get to it.
Yeah, it's just when you're in the eye of the storm, it's tough to see. But when you get through it and you think back and think, right, okay, we took action, we made the right decisions, and we're still standing. So
I did have a leadership coach for a number of years in my J&J days, and that really helped a lot at the time, in particular as a sort of relatively young leader at the time. Just having someone who sat in and observed occasionally and looked at my style and approach and helped me with dealing with personnel situations and specific situations that arose, that helped me a great deal, I think, just in terms of how I manage things and how I develop my style going forward. And I'd recommend that to anyone who hasn't had that opportunity. You don't need to do it forever, but I think if you find the right person you connect with and they understand you, it can make a real impact on what you do.
Yeah. And we've had recent guests on where we've had someone that restores World War I tanks. We've had someone that rescues bats. So what does Chris Lee, the CEO, do outside of work? What's your release?
Well, there's two things that I kind of predominantly do. So I'm a huge football fan, and I've been my family have been season ticket holders at West Ham for multiple years. So that's always been a massive passion. Me, my brother, my dad used to do that, and then his daughter came along. She started joining us, and then when those tickets have stayed in the family and been regenerated through cycles, and now it's me and my son who are now going to games and just living that nightmare scenario that is being a West Ham fan. And it's just kind of that's still a huge part of our lives and conversation around here every day. But I love traveling. I love seeing different parts of the world. I think I'm 81 countries in now that I've managed to get to, both through work and pleasure. And I love the bike. I've been a big mountain biker for years, and more lately a bit of road biking, but I try and have a combination of biking and travel, and try and get away a couple of times a year on a bike somewhere around the world, exploring places, which is always fun to do.
Man after my own heart.
Up until I moved to Dubai, 13, 14 months ago, I'd been a West Ham member for 5 or 6 years, just for the Liverpool games. Yeah. So I'm that guy sitting in the home end that's pretending to be happy, and vice versa. So yeah, that's been my
thoughts on the stadium.
Oh God, where do I start? Yeah, we haven't got enough time to cover that, but if we could buy it and own it and turn it into a proper football stadium, it'll be great. Yeah. Until then, it's never going to be what it needs to be.
Yeah. Well, thinking about your turning point and how it shaped sort of your career, but try and think about it specifically for medical devices. I know you spoke about your turning point, doing the education, asking for help. How has that benefited you? Maybe not necessarily asking for help, but that specific turning point, and then what you've then done in the industry. Yeah.
So, the best thing about and worst thing about working for Johnson & Johnson is best corporation, to my mind, in MedTech, and just had a wonderful 18, 19 years there, 9 jobs in 18 years, lived and worked in US, Europe, Asia, worked in wound closure, cardiology, orthopedics, vision care, just phenomenal experience, and a great place to learn, continuous learning, continuous development. The challenge for me comes after 19, 20 years. You look back and you go, okay, it's been great and I've learned a massive amount, but is this what the next 25 years looks like? Okay, is the rest of my career defined by these boundaries that you're in a corporation? And whilst I'll always be eternally grateful for everything they did for me and the support and opportunity they gave me, at that stage I took the decision to step out of corporate life and go and experience a completely different world, and I went almost straight into a startup. Although it was a publicly listed company, it was effectively a startup, a biotech company. So I went from effectively run a P&L as a sales and marketing leader, because that's all you are in corporate life these days. I went to managing investors and shareholders and running a business and R&D and operations and the full Monty. And the first business didn't work out well, and I learned, but I learned more in those 4 years than I'd done in the previous 20 years. Honestly, it was mind blowing. The things, waking up thinking about cash every day is a completely different experience, right? When you come out of corporate life, and it served me well. And I went straight from that into the Loungeal Mask Company. We had a great success story there. We had a great exit to Teleflex, and it was just a genuine reinforcement to myself that this is where I belonged and the space I should be in, because I could really make a difference there and see the impact that I could have on particularly high value medical devices that are differentiated and make a difference to people's lives. And that's where I wanted to spend the rest of my life. When at that point I realized I wanted to be in spaces where it was niche or different or unique, and not kind of run of the mill Me Too kind of. But there's plenty of that around, and that suits a lot of people, but that wasn't where I wanted to be. And I've tried to work in places since then that have got that impact or can make that kind of difference, and with varying degrees of success for sure. But I think that's part of the journey as well. You know, in Europe we don't value failure that much like they do in the US. But I've learned more in the 2 failures I've had in the last 20 years than I have in the 3 successes I've had for sure. Because that's where the resilience comes from. That's where the understanding. That's where you really go again and do it differently next time. Because without that experience, I don't know how you do it. Right? How do you know?
But at the time, I bet it doesn't feel like that though.
Oh,
And that's no.
Feels like the way of the world at the time. You know, yeah. you want to. But I think, you know, I've always stayed the course. I've never run away from it. And I think you just have to believe there is better days ahead, and you know, you just work harder with the right people to try and work out how you navigate your way through difficult times. And it always feels great when you come out the other end of that, right? There's always a sense of purpose and achievement when you come out of something that's been difficult, because it stands you in good stead and it's a great learning experience for the next time.
Yeah. And then obviously thinking about your like early career, 20 years in J&J, then into smaller startups, is there a kind of key lesson that you take away from the entire career so far?
I think I've come to realize that everything you do is about the people you surround yourself with. Okay. I, as an individual, can actually deliver very, very little on my own, is my dawning realization, right? As an individual, there is a limit to what I can do. And if you think about it in a puzzle terms, right? I've tried to, I spent a long time trying to get people to be good at everything, right? And be more rounded and better team players and contributing more broadly. Well, that makes no sense when I think about that now. If you've got 10 people in a team and someone is absolutely outstanding at one particular thing and we've got no one else who can do that, why don't we just focus on that individual for that thing they do and fill those other gaps with the other 9 people? If you had 10 people who had an absolute expertise that you could combine in one group, you'd have a far better organization than you would with 10 rounded people who were pretty good at most things. Right. So I think trying to get that puzzle to fit together, because it's a moving feast, right? All the time, new things arise, new opportunities, new experiences, new stuff the business needs to learn. But I think broadly, stop trying to fit people into holes and trying to focus on what they're not good at, and actually just let them run with being fantastic at what it is they excel in. And if you can gel that into a team, I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head of success.
Yeah. Can't argue with that.
It's not easy. It's really not easy. And I've made more mistakes than I care to mention, but hopefully that's how I've tried to get better at it.
Yeah. Okay. So looking ahead to the future, you know, personally, professionally, they may roll into one. I kind of alluded to it at the start, but yeah, what's on the table for you?
I think I've never been one to shut the door, and I'm not about to start now. That's for sure. So, I've been in a leadership role now for 30 years, without really not doing that, and I've been 4 weeks into not being a CEO. Which has been an interesting 4 weeks as I adapt into that. But I'm just going to take a period of time to reflect and think about that and decide whether I look at I'm absolutely going to work. There's no question about that. And I've got a couple of portfolio roles, one with Summit, one with an ambulatory infusion pump business, which I'm absolutely committed to doing. But I just feel like there's more left in me at this stage, and I'm looking to see what the next thing might bring. So, but it has to tick all those boxes that we discussed earlier. It's got to be great technology. It's got to be having an impact, and it's got to be something that I feel like I can really influence and make an impact on a day-to-day basis.
And what's been the standout, notable change in the last 4 weeks?
Just waking up without a million things in your head every single morning, right? That's been quite hard to adapt to, because when you do these types of roles or you run your own business, nothing ever gets done every day, right? There's always stuff at the end of the day that goes to bed in your head and wakes up in your head in the morning, right? So to waking up thinking, okay, what am I going to do today? I mean, I've got plans. I've got things I want to do. There's no shortage of stuff, but I'm still thinking a lot about work and opportunity and where I go and what I do, and I'm excited to see where that develops over the coming months.
And then on the kind of opportunity, but more broadly, medical devices, the industry that we work in. What excites you most there?
So clearly the AI piece and the impact that has on everything we do, I think is really incredibly interesting. There's the obvious big ticket items like robotics, which is obviously a massive developing space, growing exponentially, and the whole world and their wives seem to be interested in that space, and there's new things every day coming out there. But that's big ticket item stuff for me broadly, and that's not where I think I would add the most value or operate. I'm sort of looking more at niche technologies or areas that are changing the way practice takes place, changing treatment pathways, etc. That's the area I'm looking to see where I can find something that has an impact in that space that's different to what's being done today.
So 2 questions to close then, and first one is about your love of travel. So where's next on your hit list?
So next is New Zealand. Heading to the South Island, New Zealand in middle of February for a month. So hitting a road trip around the South Island. And yeah, been on my hit list for a long time. Never been to the South Island before. And yeah, it's just like the biggest adventure playground in the world, I think. So very excited about the opportunity to go and spend some time there, and that and some cycling trips. One round Sardinia and one in Romania this year. So yeah, that's what's to come this year.
Very good. I was with someone yesterday that does recruitment, and just before his son starts school, so he's got a 4-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. So they travelled around for about 7 months, part of which was in a camper van in New Zealand for a month. With kids. So hopefully your camper van will be a bit quieter than theirs, and probably more vineyards than they went to.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. No, it's definitely not with kids. They're both flown and doing their own thing now. So one of them will be traveling around Asia at the same time as we're in New Zealand. So, but nice. It'll just be me and my wife, and it'll be just a fantastic opportunity to get away from everything and really go and explore another culture, which I'm super excited about.
Yeah. And second question, if you were to leave our listeners with one key lesson from your journey, what would it be?
I think in my earlier career, there's always people who are more on the negative end of the spectrum, who are happy to tell you what you can't do or what you can't achieve, right? And that only lives in you if you allow it to. I think you have to have self-belief. You have to believe that everything is possible and that you can achieve pretty much anything you want to, as long as you understand your own strengths and weaknesses. Okay. And my advice is, don't try and be all things to all people. Don't try and be what you're not. Focus on what you're really good at, okay, and where your strengths really lie, and collaborate with people who fill all those other gaps. And then I think your potential is untapped. You can go on to achieve whatever you want to do, right? But just don't let anyone bring you down and impact your ability to get there.
Very good. Well, Chris, thank you very much for coming on and sharing your story. It's packed full of lessons that Nathan and I will take away as well. But thank you for sharing. And can I just invite all of our listeners to reflect on their own turning points and journeys. And if you feel like you've got a story to tell, please reach out to either myself or Nathan. Please like and subscribe, and we'll be back with another episode very soon. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.